Hey guys, it's Lori. So I've had a lot of people ask me about kids and spirit and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, about my own experience, what I've witnessed of other people, what I've studied, and that kind of thing. I'm no expert. I'm just going to share my experiences and maybe it'll help you. All right, be right back. Okay, I'm back. I want to apologize for the background noise. I shut off some of the fans, but I had to keep at least a couple of them running. It is like sweltering in here. So I'm going to focus on really young kids today, but some of these can go for older kids, teenagers, even young adults, even older adults. Maybe it'll start happening to you later. It's not an exhaustive list that I'm going over. It's just a couple things that when I look back on my own childhood, and like I said, some of the things that I've witnessed thus far and that kind of thing, um, maybe something to look out for. First of all, I'm going to say this is, please, this is really important. And a lot of parents get really freaked out by this stuff because maybe they don't know a lot about it, or maybe they're really interested in it, so they're like, oh, this is cool, or some parents just don't give it much thought at all. So please, a couple different things. Use discernment when your children are around, even when they're, a toddler running around. Use discernment about what you talk about, what their input is. So what are you talking about? Are you watching something? There's so many like psychic shows and ghost shows on TV now. Is that on in the background when the kids are around? Stuff like that. Because if you're aware of stuff like that, when some of this stuff happens, you can say, okay, it's the input. It's not necessarily like a natural thing. It's the input, right? So, and be careful what you talk about in front of them. And I mean, I'm talking about supernatural stuff and the spirit realm today, but I mean, that goes for anything. And I think that's common sense. But just a reminder, please. Number two, please listen to your children. Validate them. Even if inside your heart of hearts you know that they're making up stories, still please listen and validate them, at least to some degree. You don't want to make them into like exaggerators or storytellers, but they need to feel validated and loved. Like my granddaughter, she's a little storyteller. She always has been, and she will come up with these crazy things. Like I can't even think of one right now. But you can tell. You can tell when a kid is like making this stuff up, because when you're listening to them, then the story gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But if they're telling the truth, the story's going to stay the same. And you can tell by their emotions, by their reactions. But either way, listen, validate them, joke with them, whatever. But they need to feel validated, even at the youngest of ages. I think people sometimes tend to, oh, he's only a year old, or he's only 2, or whatever. And they kind of blow it off. And number 3, if you do realize that your child is maybe having some kind of paranormal experience or connection with the spirit realm, or maybe they're naturally gifted in that way, don't minimize it. Don't worry about it, it's just a nightmare. No, there's no such thing as ghosts, or it's an imaginary friend, or don't do that. Because not only are you invalidating them, and even if it's not a paranormal experience, you're invalidating them. Even if it is just a nightmare or whatever, they're still afraid. Validate them. Take care of it. I'll show you how in a minute. And don't maximize it either. So it's 2 mistakes that I see young parents make. If you minimize it, they feel invalidated. If you maximize it, and you're always talking about it, and tell me this, and tell me what happened, and tell me what you saw, and tell me, the kid, being a child, is going to be like, eventually, like, leave me alone. I'm not going to talk about it. So either way, they're going to back off from you and stop talking about it, and you're not going to get the truth out of them, okay? Parent has to be a parent, not a friend, all the way up from, baby to adult, or, you can be their friend as an adult, I guess. You still don't lose that parentage, but But at the same time, you want them to know that they can trust you and come to you with anything, even if it's some paranormal amazing story, okay? Especially something like that, because you know how hard that is when you're experiencing that. If you've never experienced it, let me just tell you firsthand, it's, I don't even know what word to put on it. I really don't. But okay, so pay attention to those things. And after all this, I'm going to tell you some more reasons why you have to really pay attention to some stuff, because there may be more to it than just a natural gift or whatever. Okay, so children from like birth to like 5 years old are more, it's more of the norm, whether they're going to grow up to maintain this gift or not, to connect with spirit if they're around. Well, they're always around, but you know, like a haunting or something, or to have paranormal experiences. Because I heard somebody say because their brains aren't developed. That's not why. It has nothing to do with the development of their brains. What it has to do with is the world has not had a chance to mess them up yet, which is why I say be careful with their input too, because they could just be reiterating things that, you know, they're subconscious, you know what I mean? So just be careful of their input, even at a young age, if you think they're not paying attention. But they're still pure. Children are pure. They're not messed up by the world yet. They don't know that the world thinks this is weird, you know? They're just naturally open. It's not the development of their brains, the lack of clutter. It's the lack of world, the poisoning of the world. They're naturally closer to God, and naturally closer to God, and they're depending on their life circumstances. It's birth to 5, but especially in today's world, a lot of kids are in daycare right away. They may not be as open as other kids. They may, but they may not be, because they're having different experiences. A child that grows up in chaos or around different things may either be more open or less open, depending on their exposure, their experiences, and their circumstances, you know. You can't just really say from birth to 5 years old, because kids these days are exposed to all different things. So it's hard to say, but generally speaking, they're more open. And then the world starts, cluttering them up, including parents, if, whatever. We just, oh, no, you're just a dream, that kind of stuff, okay? But these are some things to look for, that your child may be experiencing something, and it's time to pay attention. And I've got, how many things do I have listed? I have 9 things listed, so I have 3 things to really pay attention to, and then 3 reasons why children are more susceptible. And some children will outgrow this, and then I keep looking out the window because I think I'm seeing my cat that got away, but maybe not. And then, so if it's just a natural thing, and it's not like a supernatural gift or anything, it's just like a natural thing, because we're all born with an innate ability to long for and to know God and the spiritual world. The world can shut that out depending on your circumstances and stuff, but that's why, like, birth to 5, or whatever, because depending on circumstances. And then again, like right around pre-puberty or right into puberty, into like adolescence, because hormones are going crazy, and for some reason that kind of opens things up again. Actually, a lot of poltergeist activity can happen around puberty or teenagers and that kind of thing, because their energy is so intense and so sporadic that it can actually cause poltergeist activity. But that's a whole other thing. And then again, with major changes in your life, menopause, if you're going through something really crazy, whatever. So that's just like natural for all of us. And the veil is thinning, so a lot of people are seeing more. And then some people are born like wide open, and that never goes away, regardless of what their parents are like or whatever. But anyway, so some things to look for. Number one, an extreme and unnatural interest in death, or in the dead. You know, if your child seems like very, very interested in death, always talking about death or the dead, people that have died, like if they look at a picture and they say, oh, that's Aunt Rita, and they never met Aunt Rita, you know, things like that. That could very well be a sign that they are communicating or having some kind of contact, some kind of, you know, because it develops an interest in that. If they are interested in the dead and they have not had an experience where they've lost people, that would naturally make them curious. It makes you wonder, why are they so interested in that? They're talking or hearing from somebody. Number two, an unprovoked interest or fear of the unknown, or something that just doesn't, like, it doesn't seem to match, you know? Like, are they afraid to go in their room, you know? Are they afraid to go talk to a certain person, you know? And it's not provoked. There's no reason for it. Or do they have an incredible interest in something, and it's like, where'd that come from? You know, it doesn't... Sometimes this stuff runs in the family, too. So that's another thing to look into. Is grandma psychic or in tune or whatever? Or a natural healer or whatever? Or, you know what I mean, anybody, grandpa, whatever. Sometimes you don't know that stuff, because, you know, there was a time when this was kind of taboo subject. Now it's almost too much, you know. Just so you know, a lot of those shows are totally fake. The ghost shows, a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of mediums are totally fake. A lot of psychics are totally fake. You know, it's become like entertainment, you know. It shouldn't be entertainment. People born with this gift that use it for entertainment, I don't think they're using it correctly, which is why I'm not a millionaire right now. Number three, nightmares or night terrors, or fear of like their room or whatever. You know, if your child keeps having these bizarre nightmares and stuff, or night terrors, they could be getting sleep paralysis, which I know there is a scientific part to sleep paralysis, because when we go to sleep, our brain releases chemicals that will not only help us dream, but then there's a chemical that keeps us like paralyzed, so that we don't live out our dream and, you know, walk, sleepwalk or whatever. So sleep paralysis, if you wake up midstream and that chemical's still working and you can't move, yes, that's scientific. And a lot of doctors will say, well, you're hallucinating or whatever when you see like the old hag or whatever. But many times, yeah, the paralysis part might be scientific, but many times you truly are interacting with a negative spirit. Just my belief system, whatever. Number four, uncanny discernment. Now, kids have pretty good discernment anyway. I always say that if the children or the dogs or animals, dogs, cats, whatever, don't like a person, don't like a place, listen to them. But if it's uncanny, if they can totally pick up on people, like, ooh, that, and they may not know why, but, ooh, that's a good person, that's a bad person, like more than the average kid, that's a sign too. If they have mysterious knowledge, like they shouldn't know about this, and all of a sudden they have all this, you know, knowledge about something that they shouldn't have, another life, history, anything. Even whether it's personal history, you know, family stuff, or whether it's, you know, over in Scotland this happened and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people say that's evidence for past lives. I used to believe that as well until I grew in my spiritual knowledge, and I've come to the knowledge that that is not evidence. I don't see it as evidence of reincarnation. I see it as evidence of walk-ins and spiritual activity. deception making us believe that in reincarnation. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. We can talk about that later. That could be a whole video. Now, if they're dealing with a negative spirit, this is another reason why we have to really pay attention. Okay, so if your kid's having nightmares, or if your kid's afraid to go in their room, or you know, they're talking about this friend, you know, like the whole imaginary friends, whoa, and there's a fear or something there. I keep seeing it. Is she not there? I can't tell. I think I'm hallucinating myself. Like I said, don't maximize it. Don't be asking them a million questions every day. But go in the room, even if you believe that it's BS, okay? Or it's just a nightmare or whatever. Just do me a favor. Go in the room or whatever it is, or the person. If they're afraid of a person, listen to your child. Find out why. But if it's a space or whatever, go in the room, look under the bed, you know, with the kid. Bring the kid with you. Look under the bed, look in the closets, you know, the whole routine, looking for the monsters under the bed. Say a prayer of protection with your child, you know. Command any and all spirits that are negative or positive that, you know, insist on talking to your child. No, it's bedtime, they need to sleep, you're not welcome here. If you can't follow the rules, you need to go. And you tell your child, no matter how old they are, if they're old enough to understand that you are protecting them, that they also have that ability. And you know what? I know a lot of parents are against kids sleeping in their room, and I get it. You don't want them sleeping with you till they're, you know, 14. But if they're having consistent nightmares or they're claiming their spiritual activity, please don't force them to stay in that room, okay? If you cleanse it and everything and say your prayer and it's still that way, work on that. I'm not saying you have to let them sleep with you, but work on it, you know? Pay attention, validate that. If you start seeing a change in personality in your child, if they start to become withdrawn, or maybe they're angry and all of a sudden now they're hitting other kids, and there's no other reason for it, there's no physical realm reason for it, you know, there's nothing like fighting going on in the house, or, you know, blah, 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 whatever. There's no bullying at school. There's no mom and dad getting in fights, you know, none of that. Like, everything's fine. And then all of a sudden your child is changing personality. That is a sign of a negative spirit. It could be a sign. I'm not saying it always is that, but it could be, so please pay attention. The next one is unexplained withdrawal. But you know what? Sometimes that withdrawal, sometimes the children are smart, okay? Not only do they have extreme faith and they believe everything their parents tell them, and they know there's a God, regardless if mom and dad believe or not, they know there is a higher power. Even if your child doesn't tell you that, they know that. I guarantee it, they know it. And if they don't think you believe, they'll talk to them when you're not around, you know? But sometimes, if children feel like they're not being validated, they're not being heard, but yet they have this stuff going on, they may actually even say they're ill. Because that's an excuse to not have to participate, to not have to be wherever. And sometimes it gets you to sleep in mom and dad's room, even if it's without mom and dad, you know. And you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to explain that you're seeing these people or getting these messages or anything like that. You know what? Sometimes they know the future, right? That would be a sign. Like, how did you know that? You know, I remember one time my son was just out of the blue. He was young. He was still in diapers. And he grabbed me by the face and he's like, "Oh, Mama, you are so beautiful." And he told me who I would marry, what my dress would look like, where we would be. And then he goes, "But you know what? You're going to say no." I was like, wow, that's, you know. And then my friend did exactly what I'm telling you not to do. She, like, kept asking him a million questions, you know, and then he just didn't want to even talk about it anymore. He found it, like, too much, like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. It's, you know, it should be fun. It should be who they are. They shouldn't be like on command. Give me a reading, kid. You're 2 years old, you know. So pay attention. If they seem to be ill, but they're not ill, you know. I always get a tummy ache. I always want to be alone. I get a headache. Oh, I don't feel good. I don't want to participate. When I was 3 years old, I told my parents I was sick, and I didn't open Christmas presents because I was going through this kind of thing. If they're having visions, if they are, and sometimes they won't tell you about it depending on where you stand, okay? They might be seeing things, good or bad. They might actually see into the spirit realm. You know, they're, like I said, the veil is thin now. A lot of people are seeing them, but some children, especially children, but some people are just gifted always, and they can see that. They have spiritual eyes open even. And you got to understand, especially as a child gets older, or depending on what their parents are like, even as a young person, you know, not everybody else is seeing this, you know? It's not like, that's why they buy into the imaginary friend thing, even if it's not, even if it's spirit, because they know. Like at some point, and I don't know what point that is, because I just remember, and my childhood is like sketchy. I only remember little blips and stuff, but I had a lot of abuse going on. But I remember that. I'm like, I know that not everybody's seeing this, you know? And I did. That Christmas that I bailed on opening presents, who does that at 3 years old? But that Christmas, I did say I was sick. I told my parents I was sick. So obviously I knew my parents weren't going to buy my BS, you know? I wasn't sick. Now, which leads me to the last one. I used to call them the voices, okay? If your child tells you about this, what I'm going to explain, you've got negative entities around, and you've got to protect your child, okay? Or there are also, just as a disclaimer, it's not always spiritual. There are also physical illnesses of the brains that could cause this, but I don't think those hit so young. But I'm not a doctor. They might, but I know it happens spiritually. I've seen it in movies. I can't remember which movie, but I remember one time as a young adult, I heard this in a movie, and I was like, whoever did that, whoever created this movie, whoever put that together, has heard it, because that's what I heard, and I had never heard anybody else ever talk about it before. So, and I wish I remember, if I remember the name of the movie, I'll let you know. I have no idea right now, but it freaked me out. It freaked me out that it actually gave me chills, made me sick to my stomach when I heard it. But I used to call it the voices, and it would be a bunch of different voices, almost like a party in the next room, but and they were mumbled voices, but male and female. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but they would get louder and quieter and louder and quieter. It was like tormenting me almost, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. And then the really weird thing is they would, that was my kitty. Well, now that was weird. Just when I get to this part, that happens. Of course, that was my boy kitty. He knocked over the fan, and a coffee went flying, and yeah, anyway. So, these voices. Now, I was thinking about it while I was cleaning up. I've heard voices since, you know, like spirits in a haunted place or whatever, and it sounds like that. It sounds like people in another room, like, you know, partying or whatever. This was like that, but it was enough. There was an evil sense to it. Even as a very young child, there was an evil sense to it. And then when I was 3 years old, when I, you know, bowed out of opening presents. My father came in to check on me that morning, because it's pretty rare for a little kid to not want to open Christmas presents, and I told him the truth. I don't remember I don't remember the whole conversation. I just remember this little blip where I said, I'm not really sick, Daddy. I've got these voices, and I think I tried to explain it to him. And he told me, just don't ever tell anybody. Now, he could have said more than that. I don't remember that, though. And I remember thinking, see, it is bad. And I used to also see, I didn't have an imaginary friend or anything, but I could see spirit, and I knew that they were spirit. Even though they looked real to me, I knew that nobody else in the room could see that person. Anything from kids to adults to whatever. And then I had a shadow person, a man, that would come. And he would either show up in my window, because I had a window almost like this. There's Oliver. He's out there. Why does he keep doing this? I don't know. He must be telling me. I think Simba's out there somewhere. There's a little roof there. But anyway, I would see the shadow man, and he wore I couldn't see his face, but he wore a cloak, a top hat, almost like old English kind of, like Scrooge, in those days, that kind of dress, the long coat and the hat. But he was all in shadow, he was all in shadow, I couldn't, he wasn't a smoke, I could see him, a man, he was a man, but I could only see his face, a shadow of his face, and he would come around only when something bad was going to happen. I'd see him probably 2 or 3 days before something bad happened, so I would know. But who do you tell? I also had that really strong discernment around people. I was a real quiet kid. I mean, who could you tell about this stuff? And of course, my dad said, don't ever tell anybody. So on top of already knowing you're different, and I really tried to shut this off for years and years and years. And the voices, I can't tell you exactly how long they lasted, until I finally realized that I could make them go away. And then they just went away. I realized that I could make them I wish I had a parent to tell me, no, you tell them to go away. This is your room, this is your realm, they're not welcome. I wish I had a parent to tell me that, but I didn't. I'm not blaming my parents, I'm just saying maybe they didn't know, I don't know. My dad, I found out later, it wasn't until I was 30 years old, I found out my dad is also gifted. But he never told me that until I was 30. I had put an ad in the paper, and he knew that I did energy work, but he didn't know I did psychic readings, and I put an ad in the paper. That's how long ago, that's how old I am. There was no internet. We put ads in the paper, and my dad read it. He called me up, and even at 30, now that was my dad, Do you know my dad used to buy me cigarettes as soon as he gave me permission, which he gave me way too young, but he told me that I could smoke cigarettes as long as I didn't smoke that wacky tobacco, that's what he called it. What he didn't know is he was too late, already started smoking that. But I was like, yeah, sure. Well, he started buying me cartons, but do you know I would not smoke in front of that man? Or if he was going to be around, I would not smoke until I think I was 33, 34 when I first smoked my first cigarette in front of him, and I felt disrespectful then. Yeah, and my dad was not abusive. My dad was not abusive at all. My mother had some issues. Now, that's one thing I want to talk about. Okay, so, and real quick, I'm not going to go into detail. I mean, I could write a whole book about it, but there is one thing I want to talk about as far as kids go. So, if you're a parent, pay attention, especially if your child is, if your child's at home and you know what's going on with them all the time. Not so much, but if they're off to school or if you're off to work, whatever, and there are, times when your child could be alone, something could be happening, and I'm not saying it is if your child's going through this, but just something to pay attention to and be aware of. Like I said, my memory of my childhood is sporadic. I only have like little blips of memory. I don't really start remembering stuff until into my teenage years. When I left my parents' house at 15, so. But I got little blips along the way. And when I got older, before my mom passed, but it was very shortly before my mom passed, with less than a year, I started having these memories come back to me. And I'm like, no way. First of all, I don't remember being a baby. This has got to be like either negative spirit messing with me or some kind of false memory or something. But I knew that my mom was schizophrenic, and she had a lot of mental illness that I'm sure they didn't even know about back then. But she was also very sexually promiscuous, and for whatever reason, she would bring me like everywhere she went. She would threaten my father with taking me away. She did a lot of physical abuse to my siblings, I think. I know my sister, I don't know about my brother. And there's also freaky stuff that happened with my brother, but I can't prove it, and I can't remember clearly, but I know there's stuff. Thank God I can't remember, right? Why remember? But anyway, that's when the shadow man would come, before something like that would happen. But I started having these memories of, especially the smell of breath, like these strange men's breath. It wasn't my father, not even close. My father was a very good man, and he was not abusive at all. He raised his voice to me, I think, once in my life, and I deserved it. He didn't have to. I had so much respect for him. All he had to do was look at me. I wanted to please my father. But anyway, yeah, my mother was physically abusive to my sister. She not really to me. I would stand up to her. It was really strange. Like, when she'd go to beat up my sister, I would stand up to her. I was the youngest, but I would go after her physically. But I'm talking even younger than that. I'm talking like baby. And then maybe toddler. And maybe this is where the voices come from. This is where my confusion comes from. All these years I've always said I was born with this gift, right? But then I had these memories come up shortly before my mom died. And I thought, now I know that traumatic experiences can open up your spiritual side. You hear about it a lot. People will say, oh, I got in a bad car accident, and all of a sudden, I started seeing the future, or spirit, or whatever, and now they have a career that way. Or I had this major tragedy happen, and a loved one, my son, my daughter died, and then all of a sudden, or whatever, something tragic happened, and then all of a sudden they're psychic. Not me. I was born with it, as I always thought, and maybe I was. I will never know the answer to this until I go meet God himself and ask him. But I remembered like certain smells. I remembered pain. I remembered, I don't know, just an awkward feeling. I don't know. I remembered sometimes looking in my mother's eyes. And she was my mother. I loved her. No matter what, I loved her. You always think it's your fault when you're a kid, you know? And I don't blame her now. I've forgiven her. She was mentally ill, you know? She was mentally ill. She had her issues. We all have issues. None of us are perfect. But I asked her about it. I knew that she had, been unfaithful to my father. I knew that she had left me alone as a baby with my 4-year-old brother, because I have a brother and a sister. My brother's 4 years older than me, and my sister's like a year and a half older than me, or something like that. No, a little more than that. She was born in April. I was in February, so almost 2 years. And she would leave my brother, 4 years old, to babysit us and try to make it home before Dad got home from work. And he was always 2-3 jobs, so he was never home. And I think that's because that's how he handled my mother. He just worked 2-3 jobs. But anyway, I'm getting off track. I started having these bizarre memories, and I asked my mom, I had, I don't know, a long story, it could be a whole other video, but I was on my mom and on my mom and on my mom as I knew that she was getting, my mom died young, but she had her health issues, and I was like, you gotta come to Jesus, because she was very, very, like, religious. Not when she was doing all that stuff. Well, she did that stuff afterwards too, but she did not understand the concept of personal relationship. It was religion. And she was very much into the religion. She didn't go to church like all the time. She wasn't like a church lady, but she really believed in the religion. When she married my father, his parents became her godparents, and she was baptized Catholic, and that's all she knew as far as like God. Well, towards the end of her life, I was really trying to teach her stuff, teach her the Bible, teach her, turn to Jesus, just in case, you want to get to a good place on the other side, blah, blah, blah. And she finally did. Well, when she did, a whole bunch of different stuff happened, and I asked her, I wasn't attacking her, I said, Mom, I keep having these memories. Now, tell me the truth, and I'm not going to hate you. I just want to know, and I don't want to know details. So if it is true, please don't tell me details. But when I was a baby, was I exposed to weird sexual stuff with strange men? My mother never came right out and said yes, but she wrote me down a letter, and the answer is yes, and it was basically that she made money that way. Okay? With some really bad people, and anyway. And then, like I said, there was stuff with my brother, and I remember the shadow man coming before that. And so I wonder, was I born with it? Or did that trauma open me up? Because I know in other times in my life when I've had trauma, I have left my body. I don't know that everybody does that. Maybe they do. But like, when I fell off a bike, for instance, and I stopped breathing, I did not have like an NDE, but I stopped breathing. They thought, I remember them saying she's dead. I was in the hospital. It was really a big deal at the time. Everything went in slow motion like it does in every accident. But then when I was laying on the ground, my spirit left my body. It was weird. I could see I was looking down at my body. I could see the people around me from the point of the view of the body and from the point of the view of them. Plus, I could see the body from their point of view. It was really bizarre, but all at the same time. And they were saying, she's dead. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm right here. But they couldn't hear me. And I know I've left my body. I was sexually assaulted. And I'm probably going to get, like, YouTube take this down for me saying that. But sorry, if you know what I mean, if I have to bring it up again. And beat up really bad. And although I was left for dead, but I did not die, and my heart did not stop, and none of that. But during the act itself, I left my body. I remember I did, and I think a lot of people do that. Some people, their mind splits, and they become multiple personalities because their mind splits, and like another personality takes over those things. Not me. That's not what happened. My spirit left. It was like a shell was getting hurt, and the spirit was able to view it or not, right? So I don't know. I don't know if I was born with it or if it was the trauma. So my point is, if your child starts acting like, especially the last ones, change of personality, real unexplained fear, hearing voices, seeing visions, all of a sudden like super psychic, super paranormal, you might want to look into if they've been hurt at all. Doesn't mean they have been. It could also mean there's a negative spirit around, and the negative spirit is trying to cause conflict within the family, and they're going through the children because the children are more open and aware, and through that they cause family strife. It's hard to tell sometimes with a lot of family strife what came first, the strife or the spirit, because a lot of strife can bring in a negative spirit can bring in a lot of strife. So if your kid starts acting like that, and all of a sudden there's a lot of arguments and stuff where there weren't before, or a lot of bad luck where there wasn't before, you might want to look into getting rid of a negative spirit, and you might want to look into see if any trauma happened. Another thing is certain drugs. I would think all drugs have some kind of negative spirit attached, but especially like, for some reason, crystal meth, that brings the devil himself. And the kids will be affected. They'll pick it up before the adults, you know? Oh, and I got to get back to the sexual thing. Whether it is RAPE or ASSAULT, or if it's consensual, but it's promiscuous and it's like with whomever, and a lot of times if it's perverse, you know, a lot of people are like fetishes and stuff. Sometimes even if it's not perverse, but it's like promiscuous and whatever, just know this. Just like you are at risk for physical problems if you are just sleeping around without discernment and protection, you're at spiritual risk. Whatever those people have attached to them, and they're not going to know, and whatever their history is, and whoever they slept with before, and blah, 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 those entities can attach to you through, whether it's consensual, and especially if it's not. I was talking to a client not too long ago, and she had been, you know, RAPE as a child, and she wondered why later she had some real trouble with some negative entities. And like I told her, and I believe this, I know it to be true. It's not just a belief, I know it to be true. Because there are positive entities and negative entities. Whether you want to believe in them or not, whether you can hear them and see them, feel them or not, they're around us. Negative entities want nothing more to steal, kill, and destroy. And how do you do that? Sometimes mentally, sometimes emotionally, sometimes through family, sometimes through finances, whatever. They'll do whatever they can do. The positive ones are there to help you, but only with your permission, right? Same thing with the negatives. You've got to let them in. But one way they come in, and it's not necessarily through your permission, they can come in through the RAPE. They can come in through consensual SEX too. And I'm only saying that because of YouTube. You know, it's not like you can't say the words. So I just want you guys to pay attention to all that. But bottom line is, even aside from all the morbid and nasty and dark stuff, really pay attention to your kids. See what's going on with them. Like I said, even if you don't think it's true, if you think it's just nightmares, an imaginary friend or whatever, go in and clear it out. Say a prayer. Introduce your kids to God. I think there's a fine line there. I think they should have some exposure to the world, but I think they should also know God. I think people that raise their kids like in fundamentalist church or whatever, and I'm not, you know what, whatever, if that's you, fine. But just remember this, kind of like why we let kids eat dirt, right? If they only see that, do they really believe it, or is it just what they've been taught? You want them to really know God as they grow. They're not, you know, as a young child, yes, they will, because they know Him already. They know Him better than we do. But as they grow up, you don't want them to just, like, believe because you put them in church camp, Bible camp every year, and because you force them to go to church. You want them to believe because they truly know Him. So I think it's okay to have a little bit of exposure to the world, but, you know, in a safe way. Does that make sense? I don't know. Anyway, I went a long time in this video. I hope I helped. I know I spilled some tea, I guess you'd say, I don't know. I know I released some personal information about me. I don't care. I have nothing to lose. I don't care if you like me, hate me. I'm telling you the truth. If this can help you in some way. But I know the kids are not only, you know, they're more susceptible for the reasons listed above. But the world that we live in now is a lot more dangerous. There's always been good and bad. There's always been the spiritual battle. But in today's world, it is different. Yes, we've had some shifts. We've had personal growth. We're not collective.